Sir, you need to leave the plane. Now? The words slice through the cabin like a sudden turbulence. The flight attendant stands firm, arms crossed, voice clipped with authority. The protagonist blinks, confused but composed. Excuse me? Passengers shift in their seats, eyes darting between the two. The tension is instant, thick, unspoken. Security has been called, she adds, as if that alone justifies everything. I need you to comply. He exhales slowly. He hasn't raised his voice. He hasn't moved. So why is he being treated like a threat? What's the reason? His voice is steady, but the weight pressing on his chest tightens. A beat. A smirk. You're making passengers uncomfortable. His fingers curl slightly, a surge of disbelief washing over him. Uncomfortable? A man coughs awkwardly in row 6. A woman clutches her purse tighter. The whispers begin. A ripple moves through the cabin. Some passengers steal glances, others make a show of looking away. A phone screen glows from the aisle seat, recording. Another from across the row. This is ridiculous, someone murmurs. What did he even do? Another whispers, but no one speaks loud enough to matter. He shifts his gaze, scanning their faces. Curiosity, hesitation, fear, but no one stands up. He lets out a slow breath. He's been here before. Different setting, same story. Sir, I won't ask again. The flight attendant's voice sharpens. Step off the plane. He exhales. They always make it seem like a choice. What exactly am I being accused of? His voice remains measured, controlled. They want a reaction. He won't give them one. But the flight attendant tilts her head. You are behaving suspiciously. He almost laughs. Suspicious how? Sir, I don't have to explain. Security will handle this. Passengers stir at her vague accusation. A few eyebrows lift. There it is. The familiar ambiguity, the kind that turns innocence into guilt with just enough doubt. I was sitting quietly, he says, voice firmer now, like everyone else. That's not what I was told. Told by who? He scans the nearby passengers. No one speaks up. The tension is suffocating. His pulse pounds in his ears. Stay calm. Stay composed. Sir, please don't make this harder. Harder? For who? Heavy footsteps. The unmistakable weight of authority. 2 security personnel step into view. Eyes assessing. Posture stiff. Sir, step off the plane. One of them speaks, voice laced with rehearsed detachment. The protagonist's jaw tightens. He meets their gaze, unflinching. I'm simply asking for an explanation, one of them sighs. Look, we don't want trouble. Let's not escalate this. Escalate. Another word twisted to shift blame. This is escalating because I won't move? A pause. No answer. So, or is it escalating because no one can tell me what I did wrong? Silence hums between them. Passengers shift uncomfortably. The flight attendant crosses her arms, an almost imperceptible smirk playing at her lips. She thinks she's won. He clenches his teeth. He's seen this scene before, and he knows how it usually ends. His fists tighten in his lap. Not in aggression, in restraint. He could fight. He could resist. But they expect that. His pulse hammers. If he protests, he's a threat. If he stays silent, he's complicit. The ultimatum is clear. Walk off or be dragged off. He swallows hard. Dignity or safety? He glances at the recording phones. Evidence won't stop what's coming. But maybe, just maybe, it will matter later. A breath. A slow rise to his feet. But then, a hushed voice sharp with recognition. Wait, that's protagonist's name. A ripple moves through first class. A man in a tailored suit leans forward, eyes narrowing. Fingers swipe urgently on a phone. A call made in hushed urgency. Someone knows him. Someone with power. The flight attendant stiffens. The security officers hesitate. The protagonist catches the shift. The balance is changing. But is it enough? The cabin is thick with silence. The security officers glance at each other. The flight attendant's smirk wavers. The man in first class presses his phone to his ear. His gaze locked on the scene. A decision being made, a power dynamic shifting. The protagonist watches, waiting. And then, the alarm buzzed, but he was already awake. Today wasn't just another day. It was the culmination of years of relentless effort. As he adjusted his tie, his mind raced through the presentation, the potential investors, the life-changing opportunity. A deep breath, no mistakes, no missteps. He grabbed his briefcase, double-checking his notes. The stakes were towering. If this deal went through, his company would enter an entirely new league. If it failed, he didn't allow himself to finish the thought. Failure wasn't an option. A vibration from his phone, a message from his mentor. You earned this. Walk in like you belong. He nodded, sliding the phone into his pocket. He'd fought too hard to let doubt creep in now. But even as he moved with confidence, he knew the world still saw him differently. Today, like every day, he had something to prove. A flash of memory, college, a classroom filled with faces that didn't look like his. The unspoken expectation that he wouldn't measure up. The quiet pressure of being the only one. Even with a degree from one of the top universities, job offers didn't come easily. Interviews where the energy shifted the moment he walked in. Smiles that never reached their eyes. He built his company from nothing, breaking through walls that weren't meant for him. Investors who questioned his experience. Clients who assumed he wasn't the decision maker. Deals that almost slipped away because they expected someone different, but he proved them wrong, again and again. And now, here he was. First-class ticket in hand, en route to a deal that could redefine his future. Success, despite every barrier placed in his way. His reflection stared back. Crisp suit, polished shoes, not a thread out of place. Presentation mattered. For some, a wrinkled shirt was just a bad day. For him, it could be the difference between respect and suspicion. He had learned that early. Adjusting his cuffs, he exhaled. No room for mistakes. No room for misinterpretation. Today, he had to be impeccable. Another glance in the mirror. Another deep breath. He picked up his bag and stepped out the door. ID? He handed it over, watching as the agent held it longer than necessary. A quick glance at him, then back at the ID. A pause. Reason for travel? He answered smoothly, used to the script by now. The agent nodded, finally waving him through. Security was next. The same hesitant glances, the subtle shift in body language, the extra pat down as if he didn't belong. None of it was new. He had learned to keep his expression neutral, to play the game without protest. But today, the weight of it pressed heavier than usual. He collected his bag, squared his shoulders, and headed to his gate. Sir, may I see your boarding pass? He handed it over. The flight attendant scanned it, then looked at him. Back at the pass, then again at him. The hesitation was brief but noticeable. Just a moment. She glanced over at a colleague, whispering something. A quick exchange of looks. A nod. Right this way. He walked past, feeling the unspoken question in the air. Are you sure you belong here? Sliding into his seat, he exhaled slowly. He had paid for this ticket just like everyone else, but experience told him that wouldn't be enough. The plane filled up, passengers settled in, but something lingered, an undercurrent, a silent tension. A man across the aisle stole a glance, then quickly looked away. The flight attendant who hesitated earlier avoided eye contact now. The small delays in service, the forced politeness. He recognized it immediately, a familiar pattern, one he had long stopped questioning, but today, the weight of it sat heavier. A whisper of warning in the back of his mind. He closed his eyes briefly, brushed it off. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe he was reading too much into it. Then he heard it, the hushed voice from the row behind him. Did you see him board? A reply quieter but unmistakable. And just like that, he knew something was coming. Protagonist. Excuse me, could I get a glass of water, please? The flight attendant glances at him, but doesn't respond. Instead, she turns away, continuing down the aisle without acknowledgement. He watches as she stops at another row, smiling warmly at a white passenger while handing him a drink without hesitation. Protagonist, muttering to himself, maybe she didn't hear me. He waits. Minutes pass. No response. A quiet unease settles in. He shifts in his seat, brushing off the discomfort. Maybe it was an oversight, a simple mistake. Maybe. Protagonist, firmly this time. Excuse me, miss. Can I get that water now? The flight attendant stops, turns her head slightly, and exhales dramatically. With an exaggerated eye roll, she mutters, I'll get to it when I can. She walks away again. He watches as she stops at another seat, engaging in small talk with the couple, effortlessly pouring them wine. The contrast stings. A few passengers notice but quickly return to their own distractions. A white man across the aisle glances over. Their eyes meet for a split second before the man looks away, pretending he saw nothing. Protagonist, thinking, of course. It's easier to ignore. He inhales deeply, then exhales, forcing a smile, letting it go. It's not worth it. Protagonist, thinking, I've dealt with worse. I've worked too hard to let this get under my skin. He leans back in his seat, adjusting his posture. He shouldn't have to brush it off, but what choice does he have? A confrontation could escalate, could make him the problem. But still, the feeling lingers, wrapping around him like a heavy coat he didn't ask to wear. The plane jolts slightly. Just a small patch of turbulence. A few passengers shift in their seats, gripping armrests instinctively. The flight attendant suddenly appears. Flight attendant, sharply. Sir, you need to sit properly and follow safety protocols. He frowns. He hasn't moved. His seat belt is securely fastened. Protagonist, I am... Flight attendant, huffing. Just make sure you are. She turns and walks away without another word. He glances around. No one else received a reprimand. A woman across the aisle looks down at her phone, pretending she isn't listening. A man shifts uncomfortably, but no one speaks up. He exhales slowly, trying to suppress the growing frustration in his chest. His fingers tap against the armrest, a slow, steady rhythm. Protagonist, thinking, this isn't bad service. This is targeted. He looks around the cabin. No one else has been ignored. No one else has been scolded. It's not about policy. It's about something unspoken, something ingrained. The white passenger from earlier shifts in his seat. Their eyes meet again. This time, the man's expression falters, as if he's realizing it too. But he still says nothing. The protagonist swallows the lump in his throat, staring straight ahead. He's been here before. He knows where this is going. And deep down he knows it's only the beginning. Flight attendant, loud, firm. Sir, you've been exhibiting threatening behavior. We cannot allow this to continue. A hush sweeps through the cabin. Conversations die. Heads turn. The words hang heavy in the air. Protagonist, calm, controlled. I'm sorry, what? What behavior are you referring to? The flight attendant crosses her arms, eyes flickering with something unreadable. Flight attendant, sharper. You were being aggressive with the crew. A few passengers glance between them, uncertain. The protagonist breathes deeply, forcing down the frustration clawing at his chest. Protagonist, measured. I simply asked for water, twice. Since when is that aggressive? No answer. Instead, she turns away, scanning the cabin, as if rallying silent support. That's when he sees it. The hesitation in some passengers, the suspicion in others. A seed has been planted. Then, the worst happens. Flight attendant, louder, for the cabin to hear. We need security here. Now. A beat of silence. Then murmurs ripple through the seats. Passenger one, whispering. Did he do something? Passenger 2, uneasy. I didn't see anything. Across the aisle, a white passenger, the one who noticed earlier, shifts uncomfortably. Their gaze meets the protagonist's for a fraction of a second before dropping. A uniformed security officer steps onto the plane, eyes scanning the cabin. His presence alone tightens the atmosphere. Security officer, firmly. Sir, we need you to come with us. The protagonist's jaw tenses. He knows the script. He's seen how it ends. Protagonist, exhaling slowly. And if I refuse? The security officer's grip tightens on his belt. Security officer. Then we'll have to remove you. The words are like an iron door slamming shut. A choice, but not really. Protagonist, calm, measured. On what grounds? What rule have I violated? The security officer hesitates. There is no real answer. Just silence. Flight attendant, arms crossed. You're making a scene. We need to ensure the comfort of all passengers. The hypocrisy stings. The only discomfort in this cabin is the one she created. Protagonist, steady, unflinching. And if I were someone else, would you be doing this right now? Another silence. Then, the security officer's fingers twitch near his radio. A subtle but undeniable threat. The protagonist exhales. Every fiber in his being screams to fight, to resist. But he knows where that leads. The headlines, the mugshots, the justification of force. Slowly, he unbuckles his seatbelt. A satisfied smirk plays on the flight attendant's lips as he stands. Flight attendant, mock sympathy. Thank you for cooperating. He doesn't respond. Words are useless here. A few passengers watch, some with unease, others with indifference, none with courage. Passenger 3 muttering, "It's not right." But no one says it out loud. His fingers clench into fists at his sides, but his face remains unreadable. He won't give them the satisfaction of anger. The security officer steps aside, motioning towards the aisle. The walk begins. The first step feels heavy. A few phones discreetly lift. The glow of recording screens flickers in the dim cabin light. Passenger 4 whispering, "This is messed up." Another woman, middle-aged, shifts uncomfortably in her seat, but keeps her gaze forward. Protagonist, internal monologue. "You've worked too hard for this. You've fought too long. But here you are. Again." Every step down the aisle is a slow burn. The weight of history, the echoes of those before him. Those who never got to walk away from moments like this. He keeps his shoulders back, chin high. A child in an aisle seat tugs at their mother's sleeve, whispering a question. The mother shakes her head, whispering back, eyes filled with something between pity and fear. His hands shake, not with fear, but with the sheer injustice of it all. Then, Passenger 5, loud, clear. Wait, the plane freezes. Even the hum of the engine feels muted. A single voice, breaking through the silence like a blade. The protagonist stops mid-step, eyes shifting toward the source. The passengers collectively hold their breath. For the first time, the tide hints at turning. And then, a deep, authoritative voice slices through the tension like a blade. "This is a mistake." The murmur of the passengers fades. Heads turn toward the man standing in first class. A well-dressed figure with an unmistakable air of influence. His phone is still in his hand, his gaze sharp and unwavering. The flight attendant falters, her expression shifting from confidence to something closer to unease. The man steps forward, voice firm. "I've been watching this unfold, and I think you need to reconsider what you're doing." The security officers hesitate. The power dynamic has shifted. The protagonist remains still, the weight of the moment pressing against his chest. His heart pounds, but he doesn't speak. Not yet. Passengers steal glances at each other. A few exchange whispers, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. But no one challenges the man. His presence demands attention. "I'd like to know," the man continues, voice steady. "On what grounds are you removing this passenger?" The flight attendant opens her mouth, but no words come out. Silence stretches across the cabin. The tension is suffocating. The well-dressed man's gaze doesn't waver. "Your name," he demands, eyes locked onto the flight attendant. And a clear explanation. Her throat bobs. "Sir, this passenger, he was being uncooperative." "Uncooperative how?" His tone is measured, but his words carry weight. "Because from where I'm standing, he's been nothing but composed." Passengers shift. Some nod subtly, others remain quiet. The flight attendant's authority is slipping, and she knows it. I felt uncomfortable," she stammers. "He was acting suspicious." The man exhales sharply. "And by suspicious you mean existing in first class while black?" A ripple of energy moves through the crowd. The protagonist, still standing by the aisle, watches the flight attendant's face pale. She fumbles for words, but none come. "You don't even believe your own excuse, do you?" the man presses. Her eyes dart towards security, but they don't move. They're waiting now, unsure, the certainty in their stance diminishing. Then, a voice from the back. She ignored his request for water. Head snapped toward the source. A middle-aged woman, clutching her purse. She hesitates, then nods toward the protagonist. "I saw it," he asked politely, twice. She walked right past him. A younger man nearby clears his throat. "She served me without issue." He looks around. "Anyone else notice that?" A few murmurs. A ripple effect. Emboldened, more passengers speak up. She rolled her eyes when he asked again. "I saw that too. This isn't right." The flight attendant's panic is visible now. Her authority is disintegrating in real time. The well-dressed man turns towards security. "Are you really going to remove him based on this? Or are you going to do your job fairly?" Security glances at one another. No immediate response. The airline owner crosses his arms. "Enough. This is my airline." The words send an immediate shockwave through the cabin. Passengers exchange looks, murmurs growing. The flight attendant's face goes slack. "What?" "I own this airline, he repeats. "And I'm telling you, you've made a grave mistake." She stammers. I was just following procedure." "Whose procedure?" His voice sharpens. "The one where certain passengers get treated differently? Where baseless accusations hold weight over decency?" She doesn't respond. He turns to the protagonist. "Sir, please take your seat." A slow exhale escapes the protagonist's lips. The weight on his chest begins to lift, just slightly. But then, he looks at her, the flight attendant, still clinging to whatever power remains, and he knows. "You, on the other hand, need to step off this plane." A stunned hush. Then gasps ripple through the cabin. The flight attendant stiffens. "You can't be serious." "Security," the airline owner calls, eyes locked on her. "Escort her off," she sputters. "This is ridiculous. I was doing my job." "No," he corrects. "You were abusing it. And now, you're facing the consequences." Security, once prepared to remove the protagonist, now pivots. They step toward her, their presence looming. "Ma'am, please come with us." She whips around searching for support. None comes. Passengers avert their gazes, unwilling to intervene. Others watch, faces impassive. The same silence that once worked in her favor now swallows her whole. Wait, you can't do this." Her voice wavers. I didn't mean... I suggest you leave with dignity," the airline owner warns, "before you lose more than just your position." Her breath catches. The realization sinks in. With no other option, she swallows her pride and steps forward. The security team follows, guiding her toward the exit. The protagonist watches her retreat. He should feel vindicated. He should feel relieved. And yet, his hands remain clenched, rage still simmering beneath the surface. Because he knows this isn't just about him. This was just one battle in a much larger war. "Ma'am, you need to come with us, now." The words slice through the cabin. The flight attendant, who only minutes ago held her power like a weapon, now looks stunned. Her mouth opens but no words come. She glances around, searching for allies among the passengers, but all she finds are cold stares and raised phones, capturing every second. Security steps closer. We won't ask again. Her feet remain planted for a moment longer. Then reluctantly, she steps away from the aisle, each movement heavy with humiliation. Passengers shift in their seats, watching as she's led toward the exit. A few murmur to one another. Someone whispers, "She had it coming." The protagonist watches, but there is no satisfaction in his gaze, just exhaustion. The moment is a victory, yes, but a bitter one. The airline owner stands before him, his expression measured but sincere. "Mr. Carter, I want to personally apologize for what happened here today. There's no excuse. This should have never happened." The protagonist crosses his arms. Yet it did. A beat of silence. The owner exhales. "You're absolutely right. And while I can't undo what's happened, I want to make amends. Effective immediately, you have lifetime first-class membership on all our flights. No exceptions." The offer lingers between them. A token of regret. A gesture of repair. The protagonist nods slowly. "I appreciate the gesture. But this isn't just about me. It never was." The owner nods, understanding that the conversation is far from over. Within hours, the video spreads like wildfire. Hashtags trend. News outlets pick up the story. People demand accountability, demand justice. Flying While Black dominates timelines. The footage replays on every platform. Her sneer, his restraint, the moment security led her away. The airline issues a statement. "We are deeply sorry for the unacceptable treatment of our passenger and are taking immediate action." The words feel rehearsed, calculated. The protagonist reads them on his phone, unimpressed, because words mean nothing without action. Alone in his hotel room, he stares out at the city skyline. The world is still buzzing over what happened, but he knows how these stories go. Today's outrage is tomorrow's forgotten headline. How many times had this happened before? How many black men and women had been humiliated, dismissed, ignored, without a camera rolling to capture it? He exhales, fingers tightening around his phone. Justice had been served today, but one victory doesn't dismantle a system. One moment doesn't erase a lifetime of being doubted, underestimated, and scrutinized. Days later, the airline announces sweeping changes. Mandatory anti-racism training for all employees, stricter policies against discrimination, zero tolerance for racial bias. It's progress, but it's not enough. The protagonist walks through the airport, suitcase in hand. He knows change doesn't come from a single incident. Real change takes work, persistence, and an unshakable will to keep fighting. He boards his flight, settling into his seat. This time, there are no second glances, no hesitation. The flight attendant greets him with a smile that doesn't feel forced. It's a small shift, but even the smallest shifts can lead to something greater. This isn't the end. It's only the beginning. If this story resonated with you, share it. Speak up. Challenge injustice when you see it. Because racism thrives in silence. But change begins when we refuse to stay quiet. What would you have done if you were on that flight? Let's talk in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and keep the conversation going. Because this is a fight we all have to face. Together. Have you ever witnessed or experienced discrimination like this? These moments happen every day, in ways big and small. Some are blatant, others are subtle. But they all leave a mark. Maybe you've seen it happen at work, in a store, or even in your own neighborhood. Maybe it was you who felt that sting of injustice. This isn't just a story. It's a reality for so many people. And the only way we bring change is by talking about it, exposing it, and refusing to stay silent. Drop your experiences in the comments. Your voice matters, your story matters, and together we make sure these moments don't go unnoticed. Racism isn't just history. It's happening right now. And the only way it ends is if we take a stand.